Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us live or alternatively on the recording. This afternoon, we're going to be running part 2 of Global Mobility and Cultural Preparation. It was a broadcast that was very popular last time, and it would just be a shame not to continue the discussion because there is so much to discuss. So I'll be introducing shortly Robert Maisel, Elena Anderson, and Fru Hodson, the panel discussing the topic. First of all, I would like to bring onto the stage Jamie Masler, who's running a fundraising event on Monday for a girls' orphanage in Sierra Leone. But I won't say any more, and I'll let Jamie tell you all about it. So let's just get this. Hi, Jamie. Hi, welcome. And
thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Oh, good grief. I should have one of those hats just to cover this shiny bald patch. But,
well, I sure do appreciate you having me on for this announcement for Monday's fundraiser and allowing us to use your platform to get this message out and for the fundraiser on Monday. Looking forward to this show. Also, wonderful panelists you have for today's show. And the first part was just magnificent. So looking forward to the second part. But I wanted to come on today to invite everyone to join us on Monday. It'll be 3 p.m. Eastern and 2 p.m. Central Time for a fundraiser for Save the Young Girls Foundation. It's the second fundraiser we've had for this foundation. This orphanage really needs our help. We were able to raise enough funds the first time so that they were able to purchase the land. They actually cleared all the land, dug a well. They built the foundation, have the walls up, got most of the supplies. And as you know, the supplies recently have gone through the roof. So they're needing a little bit more to finish the structure so that these girls have a permanent residence. They don't have to all huddle in one room. They'll each share a room with their own bathroom. So I'm looking forward to giving a little stability to these girls. They've had a rough go and losing their parents and really not knowing where to go. And this foundation took them in off the streets and housed them, fed them, schooling them. So it's a really worthy cause. So it'll be on this channel Monday. As you can check on LinkedIn, the announcements are going out quite frequently and spreading around. But please open up your hearts at this time of the year and help to support this cause. We do show updates of where the money has gone and everything they've done from the time the fundraiser happened. So we'll be sending updates on the completion of the structure. So thank you again, Richard. I hope everyone has a happy holiday. Please join in Monday and help for a worthy cause.
Thanks a lot, Jamie. Thank you, and hope it goes well on Monday. And we'll speak in the meantime. I'll bring the other people onto the stage, and then I'll remove you.
Hey, Elena.
Hey, Jamie.
Okay, take care, Jamie.
Okay, I'll see you guys later. Good luck.
Do we need luck?
Oh, Jamie, yeah, he's gone to help Santa. So yeah, welcome again, fabulous panel. If we could probably whiz around the panel with introductions. If we go Elena, Fru, and Robert, then we'll start the discussion. But over to you, Elena, with introduction on your company.
Well, I just wanted to say welcome again and hello, good morning, good evening, wherever everyone is tuning in. I am the co-founder and lead strategist with Addy Solutions. We are global mobility and immigration strategy firm based in Maryland on the East Coast of the U.S. And so glad to be in part 2.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you. Over to you, Fru.
Hello everyone, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I'm Fru. I represent the RMC side, so I work for Sterling Lexicon in the UK. So I'm really pleased that you guys asked us back again with this wonderful panel. So looking forward to this wonderful discussion again.
Thanks, Fru. Thank you. And last but not least, Robert.
Thank you, Richard. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning into round 2 of this exciting discussion. Fortunate and honored to be called back to be on the panel again to discuss. I am a cross-cultural trainer and a travel coach based out of, you guessed it, right behind me, New York City. And excited for today's discussion. So I'll throw it back to you, Richard.
Thanks, Robert. Thank you. And perhaps, as we did last time, I might relocate you, if you'll excuse the pun, to the top left, a panel which tends to be then where the person guiding the conversation goes. Before I do that, though, if I may, I'd like to thank the sponsors of Blue Room and Saba Networking, Integrum PMS. By AVQuest. AVQuest is a payment processing software which can integrate with channel managers. I don't think Raj is joining us today, but please, anything regarding technology and especially payment processing, then do get in touch with Raj Randhawa. Also, I'm sure I wanted to say something else. Just that Saba Networking, the way that things are going right now with COVID, we might even switch that to Saba Wine Time again, because the name certainly kind of like reflects the environment in which we are, and I'm thinking maybe the wine time's coming back. But yeah, we had a fantastic chat last time, discussion last time. There were some technical issues, so I was a little bit preoccupied there, but I'm really looking forward to listening intently and asking some layman questions regarding this discussion. Generally speaking, I think what we did last time, we gave some examples of how things are different in various cultures regarding perhaps decorum and manners, and we started then talking about the trailing spouse and where the rest of the family fits in. But Robert, if I may, if I pass it over back to you, and I'll relocate your box in a minute. Just to kind of recap on some of those things that we talked about last time, perhaps, and then move on to move the discussion on, if that's okay. So here we go. So hang on to your seat.
All right.
Yeah.
So is everyone hanging on to their seat like Richard just requested? Because get ready. Well, first off, I want to say a special thank you to Jamie Maslar for coming on and saying what he did and promoting what he's doing. I was fortunate to participate in the last event, and I'd use the word life-changing. He's doing big things for that group of people, and I really respect, Jamie, what you're doing. So thank you for bringing it to our attention. And right, so Richard, just to kind of carry on, starting today's discussion with sort of a recap of what we looked at last time. We looked at culture in general. You know, what is it? Some of our personal experiences, how it's impacted the panel in different ways through travel, through volunteer experiences, through educational experiences, through all kinds of things. And we looked at culture from the employer's perspective. You know, why is it so important? And then we looked at culture and cultural training and preparation from the employee's perspective, and why it's so important, and why it's really important to understand the integration of the two, because of course when you have a relocation, you have these two sides, the employer side and the employee side, that ultimately need to be working together. So I thought we'd start today's discussion with sort of just a little bit of a recap discussion, sort of thoughts on the issue. So Elena, if we want to throw it over to the employer side, last time we discussed a little bit, how employers can really support the employee in a relocation. Why do you think, it's so important for an employer to be involved in preparing an employee culturally, and for a relocation or for being on a global team, and how can the corporate culture support an employee's cultural learning and success?
Yeah, just like we touched on during the first round of our conversation, the employer plays a major role in making sure that in order to just value the employee, just welcoming them into the company culture, as well as not making assumptions that the employee understands or can pick up on the company culture and how that links to the environment and the culture of the country that the employee is in. There are a lot of assumptions made based on maybe the employee's resume or personal background that, obviously that no cultural training is needed. But again, there's always an opportunity for a refresher. And we also talked about just the need to prioritize cultural awareness and training in that space, and not making assumptions just to save costs, that you really allow a better engagement of the employee when you make that part of that investment as part of the assignment. And when you invest in that, it kind of just opens the door for the employee to ask questions, to really seek out opportunities to understand before mistakes are made, or there are other mishaps that happen that could impact productivity and the employer's brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for all that. And
I
that's so.
completely agree with you,
Go ahead,
Elena.
Fro.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. And I have experienced exactly that, when an employee doesn't know what the culture is like, and not just the company culture, just the host country's culture. And it's not that they are frustrated, but the suppliers are frustrated because they don't know how to service that particular employee. And anybody who has to work, the colleagues are frustrated because they don't know how to work with that employee. So it is so important for us to train the employees, and not just about the company culture, but about the culture of the specific country as well. Especially nowadays, that it's not just it's just one country that people are coming from into a certain country. We've got globally mobile employees. Most of the big companies will have several cultures mixing. So it is so important for us to be aware and provide that cultural training so that they can fit into that culture, and so everybody knows what the expectations are and how to engage with each other.
And key word that you said there, Fru, was awareness. How we have so many more tools about awareness, learning from and about the employee that is going to be part of the transition. So there are assessments to really ask the questions, because you don't know what you don't know. And in the early days of developing assignments, you would link the employee with the technical skill and base cultural training on the country of origin, and not the host country, or even ask the employee, what is your background, what are your needs, what are your family's needs. And I think there's, based on so many case studies of how things can go horribly wrong for all parties involved, we now have assessment tools that just allow the employee to reveal their background, as well as talk about the stressors and their ability to make adjustments or to have adaptability in their lifestyle, their communication style, and leadership style. So it's more or less the full package, and there's a greater awareness of the trailing family members that are coming along with the employee. So it's a picture that's full color, and not just this one dimensional point A to point B let's just get this 1 hour consultation done and check the box. There's now just a greater intention around seeking out awareness with cultural training.
Yeah. And going back to that comment that I just read that Richard just responded to. Hi, Christina. Thank you for that comment. So she just noted regarding the body language, and I totally understand that could be so frustrating. So I know through clients that I worked with, so I think as an example, I can mention the Japanese culture, which was really foreign to me when I first started working with Japanese employees. So when we met the employees or HR and they have to bow down to each other as to how they greet each other, or not just the body language, but how they sit in the room. So the most important person has to sit at the far end of the room. So those kind of nuances would be so foreign to somebody, and I wouldn't understand as a relocating employee. So imagine yourself if you're going to go to a meeting in Japan and sit down at the far end of the room because you just want to be a little bit withdrawn from that meeting, and straight away you are going to be chastised from the first moment, basically. So this is why it is so important, and I can only agree with Christina. It must be so frustrating. It's not just the language, the culture, it's the body language itself as well. It has to be thought.
It is. I mean, if I may just chime in slightly with my layman's comments, I mean, it is so stark and kind of alarming, really, when words such as, and understandably, isolation are used. I mean, it's that extreme and it's that important, isn't it? So it's really quite frightening. But yeah, but Christina, yeah, was that in a particular country? I'd be interested to know. Thank you. Yeah, back to you, the panel.
Yeah, and Richard, you use the word isolating, which is such an interesting term, and it is a way that I think a lot of times people. I certainly felt like that when I relocated to Japan. I felt isolated because I hadn't had any cultural training, and I was just out there on my own to figure it out. And it really can feel challenging and really difficult for an employee or anybody who is jumping into a new culture with no prior knowledge or preparation. And I want to pull on some of the other words that the panel used. Elena and Fru used the word awareness, and I think that's so key. Opening up an employee's mind to new perspectives and giving them a little bit of an understanding about what they're going to be dealing with. And something I've seen is sometimes employers will say, okay, it's fine, because the employee understands our company culture, so they'll just be fine when they go to the new place. To that point, I do think that it is important that employees understand the what was I going to say? That they understand the corporate culture, but that they also understand the culture of the place that they're going to, because we have to remember that employees have lives outside of the business, right? So within the realms of the company, so whether they're working for, let's call it Sony, they're working in New York, and then they're going to work in Japan. There may be steps taken and things done to make the employee feel like that particular culture, that corporate culture, is in place in all locations of around the globe for that organization. But we can't forget that when that employee leaves, there's life outside of the business, right? And what are they doing? How are they interacting with folks? And that sort of brings us to the other topic that we were discussing last week, is how the employee is affected by the cultural training or lack thereof. So I want to discuss this a little bit, bring it to Fru, because we also talked last time about not just the importance of giving the employee cultural training, but the spouse and the family, right? Because those folks are also interacting with the new culture and potentially with less to do if they don't have a work permit and they can't work, or the kids are in a new environment and they've never experienced anything like this before. So want to throw it to Fru to talk a little bit about, if you've seen or had any experiences with relocating families, spouses, children, and the need for training them as well.
Absolutely. So somebody just in the comment field just made a comment to say that culture training is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And
Yeah,
I agree.
absolutely.
I totally agree with that. It's not just for the employee, and it's for the family as well. And I think I touched on this last time when we spoke, that I read somewhere that it's 80-something% of the assignments that fail is due to the spouse not being comfortable in the host country. And that's a frightening number. I feel like that should tell us something. So, like you said, it's not just to do with the fact that they don't have a visa or they don't have very much to do, but it's also the integration. So I think employers need to think of the fact that they're not just relocating a person, they're relocating a person's entire life and family. And if they're going to give cultural training to an employee, so they will have to give to the family as well, because they will. Probably even more importantly, they will need to be integrated, because the employee is going to be going to the office. Sooner rather than later, they will be exposed. So whilst if they are not going to have cultural training, it is going to be very tedious for them and very painful. And they really should have it, but they are going to pick it up sooner rather than later. For the spouse or for the children, it will be so much harder. Maybe for the children, again, they're going to go to school. So I guess for the children, it's even easier because they're going to go to school. They're in their formative years, so it is much easier for them. For the spouse, it is super, super important. They're going to be there, most likely supporting the employee. They're going to be doing everything in terms of the relocation, because the employee is going to be busy settling into a new environment, and they're going to not know what's up and what's down. And they're going to be in a completely new culture. It's almost more important to train the spouse than to train the employee, because that support network that the employee has, it's at home. So we need to look at this relocating family, as one unit. And if we are going to train just 25% of the family, that's just not enough.
Oh, that's so true. And then you got to think about the proportion of time the spouse and the children spend in the culture compared to the actual employee, which would be on site at work. And being on site at work, even if it's slightly different, it's still a familiar space or a grounding environment where at least I know my company's values. At least I know that I can come to this place on a weekday and do my technical job. But with the spouse, it's as if everything is different, and they don't have that break unless they find a group or an organization, or unless there's care taken by the employer to facilitate their integration. They won't have anything that grounds them. And so when you look at the part that's difficult to measure, that emotional stress, which feeds into the employee's well-being, then you run into a greater issue that is kind of like that slow burn to failure, in that you don't see it right away. The employee may try to make accommodations, but that's going to be just just a mental strain on the employee, because they will have to come home and hear about the challenges. And then the children may also have challenges because they may have to adapt to different teaching and instruction styles, as well as just an overall environment and meeting new friends, which could be devastating, at a young age, when you have to just do any mix up. Not to mention, they are transitioning to a new location. It didn't mean that, they left any of their stressors behind. So if there are parents that were once taken care of, just the distance from the parents and other portions of the assignment package may have to come into consideration to address, the cultural norms and just the overall well-being of the employee.
Yeah. Elena, that's such a good point. You know, when I was younger, we moved 20 minutes away. That
Oh
was
no.
that was hard. Okay, for a kid like 6th grade, that was hard. But imagine now moving like 6 hours away or 60 hours away, right? Imagine now relocating to a new like state, a new country, and imagine what those children will be going through. Imagine what that spouse could be going through, right? You really take someone's life and just in a way just throw it in a blender. It jumbles everything up. If they're not prepared for this is something they've never experienced before. And it can be life changing and wonderful, but that cultural preparation to prepare the employee and let them know what they're gonna, and the family and the kids, let them know what's going to happen is so important. And I think that, you know, this conversation, along with the comment that was made earlier about cultural training being a necessity and not a luxury, which I also agree with, is it comes back to preparation. And in my mind, I look at it as proactive versus reactive, right? There's a lot of benefits that are assigned to employees in the initial phases of a relocation that, of course, need to take place. The final flights, right? An employee has to get to the new location, right? Temporary housing. Someone has to set up housing. Like this employee needs to have a place to stay. So people have looked at culture. People can look at cultural training and say, oh, well, you know what? We're going to get the employee there. We're going to get them in a place. We don't necessarily need to train them culturally, right? And that's because, as Elena was talking about too, it's not often immediately evident the effects of not having this cultural training, but they seep in the first couple days and weeks, and really then people start to notice, right, when the employee isn't responding sort of appropriately to the new culture, or the spouse isn't understanding, you know, what's going on in daily typical interactions. And so it just sort of hammers home the need, I think, for companies and for individuals and for us as a society to be thinking more proactively than reactively. Let's invest in ourselves and our companies to provide the proper training, support, and understanding, so that we don't have to go through these extremely difficult, potentially, you know, profit altering situations, business deals that may fall apart in the future if we have a better understanding from the get-go.
I totally agree, Rob. So when you said proactive and reactive, in my experience, a lot of companies will only turn around and say, okay, let's give cultural training once an employee is frustrating to them, once it became evident that they're just not able to cope with the culture, or they're not understanding, or maybe their colleagues are complaining. And out of frustration, reactively, they turn around, okay, let's give them cultural training because we are frustrated. But then let's think about from an employee perspective now. How frustrated must that poor employee be?
Yeah.
Could I? Oh, sorry, Lena. After you.
No, I was totally agreeing with Fruth's comment, which I felt was just spot on regarding just the level of discomfort. But no, I was just nodding in agreement. Go ahead, Richard.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just wondering because I just posted there because we moved from Manchester to North Wales, different culture, a different nationality. Although, you know, you think of it as the UK, but the location wise, and Wales, they have their own language, and also from a city into, you know, a small town. It was really. It had more of an impact on me than I realised at the time, I think, you know. But what I was wondering as well was, because when when the kids move into another school, and there are international schools, in a funny kind of way, an international school is set up, okay, to make it easy for people to integrate because everyone is in this same kind of thing. But in an ironic sort of way, it's an anti-integration tool almost, isn't it? Because, you know, you then put in with a lot of other kids from other areas, and maybe those my question, or just throwing it in, and I hope I'm not being too controversial here, but it's only just occurred to me, is an international school almost a vehicle not to integrate the kids into the local life? don't know.
I don't think so. I think an international school would be even more of a thing to integrate, just because it's not just one nationality going to the international school. It will be a mixing pot. So I think it's even a better exposure for the child to experience different cultures and see how they engage. So people who will come out of, the students who will come out of international schools will be the most culturally aware children or adults when they grow up, in my opinion.
And Fruit, to your point, what that can do for a child is have incredible benefits because they're being exposed to so many different cultures. In a way, every day at school is kind of like a broad spectrum cultural adaptability awareness program, because the child's getting exposure to so many different cultures and really is setting them up to work in a global environment and to be able to work on culturally diverse teams in the future, because they understand, how just people of many cultures can interact and effectively get things done together. And they're learning that from a young age.
Well, I would like to do another perspective on that. I do agree that international schools bring on a diverse environment, but you got to realize that that environment is almost a synthetic environment compared to the real world, in that everyone has similar experiences, even though they come from different cultures. They are also on similar socioeconomic planes, and that all students have provisions. The real world or reality will expose you not just to different cultures, but to different educational backgrounds, socioeconomic, communication styles, even within all those subcultures within a main culture. And so while the school as an institution is a great environment, it does not replace real world experience and that actual integration. So like Richard was saying, it's almost like anti-integration. It's almost like a ramp, it's a ramp into it, but you have to face reality that you're going to have to operate in environments that you can't control. So you will have elements or different individuals and dynamics that won't be in an international school environment. So when you work, with specialized schools and institutions, you have to accept that, even though it is providing great tools and equipping the students for operating a business, but not everything is a boardroom. You also have to learn how to negotiate one-to-one when getting consumables, or just learning how to talk to different professionals at different levels. So there's still some training and learning opportunities that are needed that will probably happen outside of the classroom.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was gonna, Elena, to your point, you're right. There is an environment produced inside of an international school, which is, I think, very inclusive of lots of different cultures and is a great learning environment for children. But it does pose the challenge that most times, you're right, that these children are interacting with people of similar socioeconomic status, whereas they may not always be interacting with people of similar socioeconomic status in the real world, outside of the classroom. And also the point that, whatever location this is in, let's say this school is in Tokyo or it's in Singapore, because of the diversity of the students and the different perspectives coming in, it's a great thing. But it is going to be different than sort of the world outside of that classroom, and what that student may experience just on their daily walks home into the store, or out at an intramural soccer game, interacting with just, let's say, folks from the new location.
Mhm.
And Elena, to your point, you mentioned that it is a ramp, and I agree with that. So just going back to the fact that no school is going to be real life. So just think about the maths class that you had to take in school. I'm still waiting for the day when I'm going to be using most of that knowledge. So it is not real life. So, but we are going to be using all of that knowledge as a ramp to use in real life. So I think it's just important to note that they are going to be exposed to a lot more than perhaps I would have been in the similar circumstances, just because I wasn't going to an international school. And to your point that they are meeting people within a similar socioeconomic status, possibly yes, but then would that not lead to opening up their curiosity towards different cultures? So say, for example, I meet a French classmate and then I become interested in their culture and I start listening to French music and start reading French literature, and then maybe I will then visit France and then I will open up my curiosity and knowledge base later on. So I think it does open up, like you said, a ramp into different cultures.
And I want to go back to
go
one
ahead.
thing. Yeah, one thing you brought up, Richard, was, just the different types of transitions that can take place where culture has an impact. And, if we look at, just don't downplay, just look at distance and not impact. That is another factor that you have to consider. So it's not just crossing a border, but it just transitioning into a different environment altogether brings to question, is the employee and the employee's family prepared for that transition, whether it's a 20-minute move or a 20-meter move into a different location. And you just can't make assumptions. So going back to that ongoing awareness and checking in too on the employee, even if it's something that would be categorized policy wise as a domestic transition. So we can't just assume that just because there are country borders involved, that's the only moment where you invest and spend time on cultural training.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Especially if you are in America, as much as I understand of America, if you go to different states, it's completely different laws, it's completely different behavior. You wouldn't even understand the accent sometimes. So not just in the UK, but all over the world. I'm sure that it's the same thing.
Yeah, no, that's real. That's been my experience. The South to the Midwest, California to New York, we're talking very different experiences, especially for folks who have never been to the States. So, there definitely is, I feel, a need to prepare people, even domestically, who may be moving across. Now, you could argue, would you necessarily need as extensive of a cultural training? Some people might say yes, some people might say no, but I do think that the need to prepare people for what's going to happen, the different mannerisms, the different behavior, what's acceptable, what's appropriate, what's not, what's probably going to happen, what definitely won't happen, these kind of things. They do vary, in my experience, from region to region in the States.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting thing because I'm just thinking of my own country. So that's not really true in my opinion. I don't know if we've got any Hungarian listeners here. So if we've got, I would like to have your point because I don't think that in Hungary, maybe because we are such a small country, but you could move from one end to another without being too culturally affected. Or maybe I left too long ago, but maybe we are an exception.
And would you think that there are generational differences?
Absolutely.
As well? The opinion may be one position now, but what if it was during the time of the war? That may have a different impact or behavioral changes involved. So there's so many layers here. You just can't just brush it with a wide stroke. You really have to kind of look through the layers here, and that's where customization is one of those things, or just ability to know the background and the profile of the employee you're transitioning.
Yeah, and absolutely. So you're 100% right. So, but generational differences, that's like everywhere, isn't it? So especially now, and if you're thinking about Eastern Europe, then my parents were living in the age of communism, and I I'm living literally in the age of technology. So how different is that? So we're almost speaking a different language, but that's not just Eastern Europe. So I think that's almost applicable to all the countries because of how vast the technology is now and how it was in our parents' age. Again, we're almost speaking a different language to our parents.
I don't know whether this is taking us off this discussion, and please do return to it if you like. But I have another question, please, because my background is generally speaking service department, so corporate housing. My mind is going towards wondering whether we've got all this cultural training, and let's assume that all works well, but then these families will often arrive in a destination and spend a month, 2 months, 3 months in temporary accommodation. How closely do people work? Do cultural trainers or RMCs work with the accommodation providers to make them aware, perhaps, of what the guests will expect? I mean, I'll give you an example, and I went totally overboard on this one. We run a house just around the corner here in Ealing, and it's gone short-term lets, etc. And we had some Chinese guests. There were some students, Chinese students in Scotland, and they were organising a trip to London for their parents, a couple of parents who they didn't speak English at all. But I went really overboard. I looked it up on the internet, and removed anything white from the house and made sure that there were odd or even number of fruit in the bowl, or I don't know what it was, I've forgotten now, but I went just completely overboard. But they really kind of appreciated it. But back to the question really, and I'm thinking there isn't that much communication, or service department providers aren't that aware of cultural differences. What would the people think, please? Over to the panel.
Yeah. I book service apartments on a daily basis, so I think I will go ahead and answer that from my perspective. So I think you mentioned a very good point there, Richard, and certainly that opened up my eyes, because I always think about service departments as plug and play, and then just get people in and ship them out as soon as possible so that they are settled into a long-term home. So I never really think of even letting service department companies know about any cultural nuances. So you made a very good point there, because I could do better in that front. Now, that being said, I also sometimes feel like that even if I did, not everybody would be as conscious as you, for example, in removing everything that's white, because then there's service departments, they tend to think, like I just told you about, plug and play, just get the employee and get them out. This is what it is, keep it clean, don't put up a Christmas tree and go. And so I feel like sometimes if we made that request, and probably that's a different topic, service apartments, but I don't really know how successful we would be in catering for those requirements.
It helps, I think it really helps to just drop a few nuggets if you're working with a service provider and you just want to bring it up in conversation. Hey, this is our next employee that would need some support. It's our awareness that they're from this country or have this background. Just be aware of X. And so when I was in-house, when I was on the corporate side and I had a furnished housing provider, just dropping nuggets saying, please, when you look at options, the number in the address matters. Like, make sure it's not all fours, and it's certain things when it comes to just awareness, or make sure that the number ascends in a way. So there were some addresses, I think, I'm in the Washington, D.C. area, and where things are located, the locals are very conscious of zip code, right? They're very conscious of where this is positioned to the White House or to Congress or to places of interest within the city. And there's just different perspectives when you're working with nationals of other countries. So I've talked about things from the number of the building, like, okay, please let's not have, the 4444 Massachusetts Avenue building not be on the list for this individual. Or I even had moments where I would reach out to the colleague and say, what would make this unit feel like home away from home? So finding special pans and even, a slow cooker, pressure cooker, a clay pot in an apartment, just writing those things into the deal. And believe it or not, I'm so impressed by corporate apartment providers just having a warehouse accessible or being able to find those small items that will make them feel welcome. And that's that personal touch that employers can have, especially in the moment where they're in temporary housing, because one, they don't feel settled, and it's a new environment, and they're just trying to get acclimated where they can be productive for your organization. And it just takes a few pointers just to ask them, how do you feel adjusted? If there's a color, you can't easily change paint color, but maybe there are drapes that can make things a little bit lovely. Or if you know that maybe it's a female traveling alone or transitioning on her own, to make sure that you identify the security protocols of that location, that maybe there's a concierge desk or controlled access to the building. So just pointing out, hey, I see you, employee, and I just want you to make sure that you're comfortable, just speaks volumes about their peace of mind and just feeling integrated in their new location.
I just have a question for you, Elena. So I'm always a little bit nervous about assuming things of certain cultures. So if I go ahead and request certain things without necessarily bringing that up as a kind of like a gesture, almost like a gesture of goodwill, and I'm always a bit nervous of how that's going to be taken. And maybe not the same thing, but as an example, I can bring it up that I have a transferee who I discovered has a Japanese wife who then he put in copy. So I didn't address this wife as hi XYZ son. And then I was thinking, should I have done that? What if they don't really identify with their own culture? What if they took offense in that? So how would you handle a situation where you just go ahead and assume that they would like certain things provided for them?
Yeah, you could do it in different ways. So if you have like an intake questionnaire, customizing it where you have one or two questions of uh, what are things that will make you feel more like, I actually had a question, what is something for your kitchen that you would like that is not on the standard list? And given, and have the disclaimer, given that there are budgetary or supply challenges, and with each colleague and their spouse having just the conversation, just having a phone call, and the phone call could initially be a check-in and a status update to say, hey, how do you have any questions about the city that you're transitioning to? what are your what are some of the things you want to do? So just having casual conversation and making note of what they have. And I worked with a supplier that used to do gift baskets, just have a basket available, but sometimes there would be things that the employee would be allergic to in that basket. Like, not everyone can have a nice chocolate bar or popcorn. So just asking, are there any dietary restrictions? We are creating a welcome package for you. Any dietary restrictions that we should be aware of? So there are subtle ways where it's still a surprise, but you can get that intel about what their likes and dislikes, or really what they may be allergic to, are involved. So I try to fit it in different ways, from the questionnaire to taking notes during conversations when I'm checking in to make sure that they're settled in, and checking back. So once they're on site, that check in, hey, what do you like? And sometimes it doesn't reveal itself until they're there and been there for a couple of weeks, and they're like, I'm starting to feel homesick, and I just want to do this dish, and that dish could just be knowing where to find the special fish oil or something else that is available, but maybe you have to go to a special market too. So it's just, listening, I would say, and having different points of engagement where the employee will tell you exactly what they want, exactly what their stressor is, but it just comes through differently,
Yeah.
either in questions or just different aspects of the conversation.
So what I understand from what you just said is that I think we can be more straightforward as to other points in the conversation, like dietary requirements. So we kind of have to walk around the question. So what is your culture like? So what are your cultural preferences? I certainly feel a little bit queasy if I have to ask something like that. So I think that's an acquired skill, isn't it, to kind of understand somebody's culture. So circling back to cultural training, I think it is important that not just employees, partners, but also global mobility professionals get their cultural training. So we don't have to second guess. And then once we
Absolutely.
get that engagement, so like you said, building relationship with the transferee is super, super important. So we can understand what their preferences are, what their dietary requirements are, what they're looking to get out of this relocation or stay in a corporate apartment. But equally, we need to be aware of what it is that particular culture that we can provide. What are the nuances where we can add an extra value? So that's why we also need to be super culturally aware, and perhaps more so even than any employee.
Yeah. And as I'm listening to this conversation develop, this idea is forming in my mind, this theme of going the extra mile. And I'll develop this idea a little bit, and then throw it around to you guys and see what you think. And as for you were saying, I think it's important for all elements of the spectrum of the relocation, the employee, the employer, the service providers, everybody to have a cultural awareness, and to do our best, as Elena is saying, to develop that awareness, to ask those questions, to get those answers, to make people feel as comfortable as possible. And the reason I say the extra mile and how it links into customer service is my own personal experiences around the globe of being curious and learning and understanding about people's cultures have really created a synthesis and a strong connection between myself and strangers, people I never knew before. But by understanding their culture, it created this strong bond, this strength between two people, understanding that one person is trying to understand another. So even if and it's a common thought and worry to, oh my God, what if I screw something up in the new culture? Well, guess what? It's probably going to happen at least once anyway, no matter how much training you have. But the training is helpful in eliminating some of those major mistakes you can make, and the understanding. I think one of the most important understandings to have is that with that cultural training and preparation, we're in a better position to interact with folks in their native environment, and they're going to take note of that. People respect the fact that they will know that you have studied a little bit. They will know that you have done your research when you do things like Elena was talking about with the numbers, or when you do things like Richard was making sure there's no white in the room, whatever the case might be. When you do culturally relevant things that show that you're prepared, people will focus, in my experience, on that rather than the mistakes you may be making by accident.
And I saw a comment from Lynn Ripley, just commenting about cooking items. I think it's so great that even with cooking items, I would say with basic understanding, when your global mobility professionals have basic cross-cultural training, that even certain cooking items like measuring cups, like in the US, I have to consciously ask for different measuring units or cooking items with the metric system represented and not just in cups. Because oftentimes I see that transferees would like to replicate recipes from home just to keep that connection. But if they're transitioning to the US where everything is in cups and teaspoons and tablespoons, that doesn't equate to liters and milliliters. And having something with at least both just a measuring cup with both measuring measurement units on it is such a great bridge, because it's just that one thing that can make a difference, because that way they can receive new recipes from their new friends in the US. And just even when talking about the size of a unit, when you're looking at housing, communicating it in meters rather than in square feet is so helpful. And I would say that, as far as a U.S. dynamic, and if there are any other countries that have differences with how they have measurements, I think the U.S. is just the weird ones in this in this scenario. But understanding that conversion is necessary, and that helps bridge all of that shock that may occur.
You think you've got a problem, Elena? Britain after Brexit, I think we're even thinking of moving back to the imperial measurements.
Oh, wow.
Forgive me, everyone that disagrees with me, but blimey, how to actually drag a country backwards. Anyway, that's me making my political statement. Right, if I could please interrupt, because I can't believe how fast that hour's gone. I will run a sponsor video, if I may, please, and then we'll run another video on Cotime Cafe and Bar. So probably in total 3 minutes. Yeah, here we go. So the next video, Cotime Cafe and Bar, I just like to kind of focus on the functionality of it, because we've done Sabre networking on Zoom for 2 years now, after we'd been running the event as a live event for 10 years. We missed the wine bar quite a lot. We used to run it in a wine bar for a long time. And the functionality of this new software platform, at least, I think can offer so much. But I won't talk about it. Hopefully, the video tells the story, and then we'll swing back into our discussion. Not sure whether that froze part way through. It's always hard to tell when you're at this end whether it's frozen or not. Hopefully not. But welcome back, everyone, and panel as well, of course. Something early on that Julie Caps mentioned, because you used the word bridge, which reminded me, Elena, the subtleties of language, where foreign language speakers will appreciate even the masculine, feminine, this neuter, and whatever other cases, genders there are applying in a language. It can be that subtle. You can use the wrong gender in it for a word, and it all means something completely different. So I just wanted to recognize that Julie's comment there. If anyone wants to dive into that, that'd be great. I also will then. I think Veronica has got a question in the comments, and there are a couple more comments, but. Over to the panel in case there are any comments on language, use of language there, please.
Well, the only thing I want to say to this, like, not necessarily a mistake, but in Hungarian we don't have genders, so there's no he, she, it, which is have like a generic term for everything. So I make so many mistakes. So even though I've been speaking English for 20 odd years now, I think. Still, I make so many mistakes because I just cannot make a difference between he or she anymore, and people are laughing at me all the time.
It's an interesting point, Fru. I want to just jump on that bandwagon. Is that language is so fascinating because they're all different, right? Some have masculine, feminine, some like don't, and the ones that do, we can find ourselves making mistakes here and there. What I think it comes back to really is intention, and people can usually feel your intention. So if you've by chance made, a masculine, feminine mistake, I don't think it's something to get too flustered over. As Fru was saying, the fact is we all speak our mother tongue. Even I speak English incorrectly. I make mistakes in English, right? How am I supposed to speak another language perfectly if I don't even speak my native one perfectly, right? That's a major point that I make in my book, is that we shouldn't be afraid to learn new languages, because inevitably nobody's perfect. That word is something we strive for, but doesn't actually fully exist, right? So with the ideal of perfection, let's just keep getting better. But let's be aware. Let's make as little errors as we can, but just move forward with the intention to learn, grow, and understand. For example, my experience in China was very difficult because of the tones. I was oftentimes very much not understood, but through constant interaction and finally would get my point across through gestures and whatever, for the folks that initially when I was learning couldn't understand the tone. So there can be these miscommunications for sure. But I think that through the effective means of communication, through other forms, even body language, gestures, writing, diagrams, people get creative when they really want to get a point across. You can do it.
For sure. And what Noam Chomsky said? He's the father of generative linguistics, and he said each and every use of language is correct as long as you are understood.
Love that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, definitely had several moments of misuse of just masculine and feminine words, and even just accents, which syllable is emphasized over the other. And I can make one mistake verbally, but a different type of mistake in writing. So I just always welcome correction, because I never pretend to be fluent, not even in my native tongue, like you said, Rob, because you just don't know. And then language evolves. It's organic, almost like us. So what I love about it is that, you can witness an evolution of a language as you meet and build relationships. So just don't, I don't take myself too seriously. Treat it as a journey of learning and an opportunity to engage and have conversations around, that error that you may have made. But I welcome and appreciate all corrections when it comes to the use of language.
Exactly, Elena. I just want to just top that off by saying, we and a lot of other cultures also live in a place where it's like there's almost this fear of making mistakes, or people are so concerned. But let's, we'll do our best do our best, if you will, but throw that idea of perfection to the wind. Go embrace new experiences and challenges. Learn a new language. Be okay with being corrected. You know, if you have a little mishap, it's fun. It's funny. You'll learn something. I think if we approach it with a lighthearted attitude, it's the way to go.
Yeah, and sometimes it does come out funny, because sometimes I also translate things from my language, and sometimes people just don't understand what I mean. So I used the term mirror eggs the other day, and whilst Germans would understand what I meant, the English wouldn't understand that means fried egg. And then
Yeah.
calls it,
Sorry,
it's a
Fru, I
type of
didn't
mirror.
realize
We call it mirror eggs.
my mic was off there. Yeah, Spiegelei.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Oh, I learned something.
When you're talking, in fact, and I mean, this is a completely different topic almost, but it does make me wonder. We're talking gender of words here, and whether this will become, whether grammar will need to be rewritten almost, because do we talk of words with genders when the gender is kind of like a discussion, is a bit of a topical thing increasingly? So I don't know, you know what I mean? But there were a couple of questions. So Raj here, whoops, where's he gone? Raj is asking regarding podcasts. So probably I've heard it suggested international students listen to podcasts to help them get to grips with the language and the cultural differences. Have companies also used this approach? Is anybody aware of that at all?
Yeah, I think not. I've not been aware of that being used for cultural training, but for language training, most certainly I have seen that being used, not just podcasts, but YouTube videos, TED Talks, everything. So it's a wide range of resources that are available nowadays. So I don't see why it couldn't be used in cultural training podcasts, especially the ones that are on topic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Remind me of when I've started listening to Mireille Mathieu to my embarrassment, and I've been playing that on, Alexa, play Mireille Mathieu. But that was because that was the only thing that was available to me when I was doing my French A-level. I got a load of French records just to listen to French. So yeah, lucky people learning languages nowadays, podcasts and YouTube. Yeah, good one.
Yeah, music is really great. And pop shows, they also teach culture as well. Those classic syndicated shows and whichever culture. There's so many individuals that I've met that learned English or improved their English by watching the Friends series in the US that was syndicated in different countries, or just that iconic thing. So they learned the language and saw it in use, but also certain cultural references that you can do jokes on. So it's really great to switch up the platform. And there's so many in larger companies, they have their own media series where it could be the company's podcast series or their media outlets.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Elena. So Veronica asked this question on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most important. Where would you rate integration of family into the new environment, or should there always be an arm's length between relocated family and the real world in the new country? So I think the question is how important basically is integration? Is it that necessary? Or can the whole family kind of survive without? Well, yeah. To what extent is integration important, would you say? Anyone?
11.
Fru, are you starting? You going first?
I should say 11. So without the family, I think we touched on this earlier. So the family is a support network of the transferee. So we need to look at the family as a unit and not just the transferee. So for the family to be integrated is just as important as for the transferee to be integrated. Otherwise, the whole unit is just going to be dysfunctional.
I agree with that rating. And then integration is defined by the family. And so what we see as integration may be a different concept with that actual family that may have their own interpretation of it.
Agreed. I'm also going with an 11 for.
Mhm.
Fabulous. There you go, Veronica. You've got the conclusive 11 there from the panel. So thank you. Yeah, I mean we've gone past time again. I think put part 3 beckons everybody, but would as we close the discussion, are there any topics or elements of this topic that you would like to still discuss? And or make your final kind of comments on and let the audience know what you do and how you can also help them. So
Richard,
any topics first of all?
Yeah, just a final sort of concluding remark is to wrap up our thoughts and discussion on just the different ways people can learn, based off the podcast question, can further their learning culturally and can further their language learning. I think, as Elena was saying, there's just so much value in mixing up the mediums. And, from my experience teaching abroad, I learned that everybody kind of learns a little bit differently. So whatever way you personally resonate most, whether it's podcasts, movies, music, doing something you're interested in and you are engaged in is probably going to net the greatest results, in terms of tacking on additional language capabilities and learn a little more about the culture. So follow your instincts, and go with what you know is interesting and engaging to you, and that will keep you interested and engaged to learn more.
Mhm.
Elena, would you like to go next?
Yeah. My final thought is to be intentional about the relationship, and so that will lead to curiosity about the employee as a human being. So once you're curious about the employee as a human being, it will naturally lead to prioritizing the family that's with the employee, and as it'll also lead to just those additional questions that make that employee feel comfortable. So there's a lot of patience and grace that is involved with planning and executing and just following up on transitions of any kind. And if you remember that there is a human being behind this transaction, it will definitely ground you and lead you as a professional to the right questions to ask, and really set a really fertile ground for that employee and their family to feel welcomed and engaged.
Thank you. And we'll come back to that, Veronica. If I need to just give through the full screen there, otherwise the final comment. So I'll kind of peeping over the comment, the thing at the bottom. So yeah, over to you, Fru. Last not least.
Thank you. So my final comments would just be to employers who might potentially be watching this. So just be empathetic and think about the fact that we don't know what we don't know. And then when it comes to authorizing these services for your employees, just think about your employee first and foremost. Make sure that you think about them as a unit. Make sure that you are going to feel for them and their situation. They're going to be uprooting their lives to come to a different country, and how that will affect them, how that will affect their family. And then be sure that you're going to provide them with the support that they need to be able to be successful, not just in their lives, but for being a support for your organization as best as they can.
Thanks, Fru. As an illustration of how this conversation could last for days, you've just made me think of something else. Has cultural integration, because it is very much a kind of a heart thing, isn't it? We're thinking about integration and really not, rather than the isolation, and it's the world today where there's a lot more feeling and consideration. Has this sector, or has cultural integration always been an issue? Or I can't imagine it in the 1970s.
You can't, because it wasn't spoken about.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think we had the vocabulary either. We've gotten a lot more because of research, because of the importance of expansion and seeking out new markets to even spark the need for more global assignments, the activity had to increase, and with that the research, and like we just have a better vocabulary and more research to work with to realize that it is a thing and that we should make it a priority, and that those priorities lead to some bottom line results. So yes, it is very different, but the same dimensions have always been there. We just never gave it a name. And so now some of the challenges we now have, we can articulate what it is. And because of that, we can help improve it.
And I can kind of make a connection. It's almost similar as if to go to a therapist. So millennials go to a therapist now, and it's not even a question. Everybody goes. And cultural training is almost similar to that. You are more in touch with your feelings. You're more in touch with the fact that you're not comfortable in a new environment. And then you analyze it. Why is that? And then it comes down to the cultural differences. And that comes down to the necessity of cultural training. So it may not have been spoken about in the 70s, but that's just because, like Elena said, maybe it wasn't that spoken about because we didn't have the vocabulary for it. But now we have. Now it's with the technology as well. It's more widely known.
And Fru, I just want to say that I think that point is really interesting and important, that, you know, nowadays it's okay. It's accepted to see a therapist, right? A lot of millennials are doing that. It's a thing. And a lot of that is focusing on the internal, processing people's experiences. And cultural training does provide people with a new understanding of a new place that they're interacting with or going with, which does in turn cause them to become introspective and think about their own habits, their own values, and to really challenge those and question those, and to see how they react in new environments. So I do think there's that interesting introspective element that certainly does come out in the cultural training.
It's so true. Somebody just commented in the old days, it was very much when in Rome. And I think in certain countries, it's very much like that. And that's exactly why cultural training is so important, isn't it? When in Rome. So you have to adapt to certain cultures more than others. So, for example, if you go to Dubai, you cannot have a Christmas tree. And that's no questions asked. It's not a negotiation.
And that can be really hard for people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What, you can't have a Christmas tree? Why?
Let's go into that topic in a different conversation.
Oh, okay, right, fair enough. Okay.
So religious.
Okay. Oh, so, yeah. Okay, fair enough. So, yeah, Julia's mentioned there, really, and again, this is a topic for another time as well, I suppose, or it's an extension to the topic. How do we get the global companies who are transferring employees to see its value? So, cultural training. So yeah, I think part 3 beckons. Also beckoning at this time is we've got a family. They are locals, but they're coming over from LA to spend 2 weeks in West London, and I'm assuming that they've integrated. I've been thinking about this outro for so long, so they've presumably they've integrated so well into American society that when they come back, I will have to welcome them with burgers and root beer. So that's my little. But I won't be able to get that, obviously. But yeah, no, thank you very much for everybody for your time, your very valuable time. So thank you for all those insights. Once more, thank you to the audience, both live and those watching the recordings. So Co-Time Cafe and Bar will be open. So just go onto that URL, cotime.com, and see who's there. I won't be, I'm afraid, because I'm going to have to check in. But thank you once more, panel and audience, for another great broadcast. And we'll play the outro. The audience probably think that we just in a dignified fashion leave the stage, not knowing that actually backstage we're all kind of boogieing around there. So So yeah,
Especially
thank
you,
thank you
Richard. Especially you.
thank you once more, everyone, and yeah, take care. Oh, should we all wish everyone a happy Christmas and a happy holidays? Yeah, so hope everyone has a happy festive season.
Happy holiday season, everyone.
Happy
Oh,
holidays.
yes. Mhm.
See you.